All have a tendency to focus on the evil men in the world while overlooking some of the truly evil women who have lived. Here we have despicable women who have caused tragedy in the lives of many people. Mary was Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon's only child to survive childhood. Mary is best known for temporarily and violently returning England to Catholicism after the death of Edward VI and the removal of the 9 Days Queen Lady Jane Grey. Many prominent Protestants were executed because of their beliefs, earning the nickname Bloody Mary. Myra Hindley and Ian Brady were responsible for the Moors murders that occurred in the Manchester area of the United Kingdom between 1963 and 1965. These two monsters were responsible for the kidnapping, sexual abuse, torture, and murder of 3 children under the age of 12, as well as 2 teenagers aged 16 and 17. A key discovered in Myra's possession led to the discovery of incriminating evidence at Manchester Central Station's left luggage depot. A tape recording of one of the murder victims screaming as Hindley and Brady raped and tortured her was among the evidence. She developed a swagger and arrogant attitude in the final days before incarceration, which became her trademark. Hindley appeared unconcerned about her situation.
Zelda Blanco is probably the most well-known woman from the Colombian era of cocaine fame. She was born in 1943 and became a drug queenpin in her youth. She's said to have been the mentor of the much more infamous Pablo Escobar, though they later became enemies. Her nicknames included the Godmother and the Black Widow. Though we're not sure exactly how many people she killed directly, if any, we do know that she indirectly led others to commit hundreds of murders. At the time of her death, she was reported to be worth $2 billion. On September 3, 2012, while sitting at the Cardizo butcher shop in Medellin, Colombia, a gunman climbed off the back of a motorcycle outside the shop, entered, pulled out a gun, and shot Blanco 2 times before calmly walking back to his bike and disappearing into the city. Who can physically take just about any man should probably be on this list, right? At least that's what many think. Belle stood just 6 feet tall and weighed 200 pounds, or about 1.82 meters and 90.7 kilograms. But she's known for being one of America's scariest and most prolific serial killers. While the details of how many people she killed are unknown, she's likely to have killed both her husbands and all her children separately, as well as her suitors and boyfriends. Why? Life insurance policies. She lived entirely off of other people dying and giving her money, essentially. She probably killed over 20 people over the course of decades, and some even think the number is over 100 victims. The worst part? She was never caught. A popular belief is that she died in a fire in 1908, but many believed that she faked her own death and skipped town.
In 1990, Canadians Carla Homolka and her future husband Paul Bernardo raped Homolka's own sister, then let her choke to death on her own vomit. Not satisfied, the pair raped and killed 2 other teenagers over the next couple of years. Claiming she was forced to kill by Bernardo, Homolka copped a manslaughter plea. By the time videotaped evidence proved she was no victim, it was too late, and she got away with a 12-year sentence.
Carla had misled the authorities about her involvement in the crimes. On the videos, she was seen fully participating in the attacks. Had the tapes surfaced earlier, they could have affected her infamous plea deal.
Over a 2-month period in 1991, British nurse Beverly Allett murdered 4 children in her care by various means. She also tried to murder 3 more and seriously injured 6 others. Labeled the Angel of Death, Allett was found guilty and sentenced to 13 terms of life imprisonment. Hopefully they don't let her help out at the prison infirmary.
The Alhambra Decree, which forced the removal or conversion of Jews and Muslims, goes into effect on March 31, 1492. Approximately 200,000 people fled Spain. Those who remained chose conversion and were persecuted by the Inquisition investigating Judaizing conversos. Pope Paul VI initiated her cause for beatification in 1974. This puts her on the road to possible sainthood. In the Catholic Church, she is referred to as Servant of God. Beverly Allett. Beverly Gale Allett, the Angel of Death, is one of Britain's most well-known serial killers. She is responsible for the murder of 4 children and the serious injury of 5 others while working as a pediatric nurse. Despite being convicted of death or injury in 9 cases, Alit attacked 13 children over the course of 58 days before being apprehended. Alit has never revealed the motivation behind her crimes, but Munchausen syndrome by proxy explains her actions. This contentious personality disorder entails a pattern of abusing or harming someone in your care in order to gain attention.
The Angel of Death, and was convicted of murdering 4 children. That's just the one she was able to kill, though. She tried to murder more. In fact, she was also charged with causing grievous bodily harm to another 6 kids. She didn't do this over a long period like other women on this list, though. She committed the crimes in a period of 59 days in 1991 at a hospital in Lincolnshire where she worked as a nurse. She'd insert large doses of insulin into children or even air bubbles. She's currently in prison for life, but no one could figure out just why she committed the murders in the first place. American woman of the most evil natures, she was the leader of the Barker Gang during the Public Enemy era of the 1930s, in which she led them through robberies, murders, and even kidnapping. Then in 1935, she was found and killed in her hideout in Florida, in what the FBI marked as the longest shootout in history. Her son, Fred, opened fire on the FBI while they surrounded their house. Both he and his mother, Ma Barker, were killed by federal agents after an intense, hours-long shootout. Allegedly, many local people came to watch the events unfolding, even holding picnics during the gunfire. Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon, she was the only child to live to adulthood. She was then the first Queen of England from 1553 until 1558. Not long, right? You'd think she wouldn't have done too much damage. Nevertheless, she's known as the worst queen to date. Bloodthirsty and evil, Bloody Mary would persecute Protestants, even executing hundreds of them. She'd stop at no one, even having her very own cousin, Lady Jane Grey, beheaded after it was made clear that she would possibly take her throne.
The love of a mother is a great thing, except when taken to extremes. Case in point, Leonardo Cianciulli. In Italy, in the late 1930s, Cianciulli's son was drafted. Believing only human sacrifices could keep her sonny boys safe, she brutally killed 3 of her neighbors. She then boiled them and turned them into tea cakes and soap, spawning her nickname, the Soapmaker of Correggio. Derided by the press as the most evil woman in Britain, Myra Hindley and her partner Ian Cross carried out the Moors murders in the early 1960s. Their victims, whom they also tortured and sexually assaulted, were 5 children and teenagers. Hindley's coldness and indifference to her deeds made her one of the most reviled women in the country until her death in 2002. Number 6. Mary Ann Cotton. Some people just can't hold their arsenic. Just ask Mary Ann Cotton, a notorious 19th century British serial killer who even inspired a child's nursery rhyme. Cotton is estimated to have poisoned as many as 21 people, including 12 of her own children, 3 husbands, her mother, and a lover. But the hangman got back at her. Legend has it he intentionally used the wrong length of rope, so her death would be longer and more painful. Lizzie Borden of Massachusetts also inspired a macabre nursery rhyme, but hers is inaccurate.
Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks, and when she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41.
Mrs. Borden only got 18 or 19 whacks, her father 10 or 11. Also, there's a lot of debate as to whether Lizzie really did this dirty deed at all. The jury at her 1892 trial acquitted her of the crime. To be honest, we can't be sure either way. Not because of the evidence, but because the nursery rhyme is so damn catchy.
Mary Ann Cotton, an Englishwoman, is another for-profit serial killer who predates Bell Guns by 30 years. At the age of 20, she married William Mowbray. The couple had 5 children, 4 of whom died of gastric fever and stomach pains. When they returned to the Northeast, tragedy seemed to follow them. 3 more children were born, 3 more died. William died soon after his children, in January 1865, of an intestinal disorder. Her second husband, George Ward, and one of her two remaining children died of intestinal problems. Local newspapers reported that Mary Ann had lost 3 husbands, a lover, a friend, her mother, and a dozen children to stomach fever as she moved around northern England. On March 24, 1873, she was hanged at Durham County Jail for murder by arsenic poisoning. Her reputation for debauchery was well earned, as she was famous for her souvenirs, tattoos taken from murdered inmates. Ilse was promoted to Oberhofschärin, or chief overseer, of the few female guards at Buchenwald after constructing an indoor sports arena with 250,000 marks stolen from inmates in 1940. On September 1, 1967, she committed suicide by hanging herself at Achach Women's Prison. Irma Gries, also known as the Bitch of Belsen, worked as a guard at the concentration camps of Ravensbrück, Auschwitz, and Bergen-Belsen. In 1943, she was transferred to Auschwitz. By the end of the year, she had been promoted to senior supervisor, the second highest ranking female in camp. She loved her job as the guardian of over 30,000 Jewish female prisoners. Savagery of prisoners by her trained and half-starved dogs, sexual excesses, arbitrary shootings, sadistic beatings with a plated whip, and selection of prisoners for the gas chamber were all part of her job. She reveled in both physical and emotional torment. The first Australian woman to be sentenced to a natural life term without parole, Catherine Knight had a history of violence in relationships. She mashed the dentures of one of her ex-husbands and slashed the throat of another husband's 8-week-old puppy before his eyes. A heated relationship with John Charles Thomas Price became public knowledge with an apprehended violence order that Price had filed against Knight and ended with Knight stabbing Price to death with a butcher's knife. He had been stabbed at least 37 times. She then skinned him and hung his suit from the door frame in the living room, cut off his head and put it in the soup pot, baked his buttocks, and prepared gravy and vegetables to accompany the roast. The meal and a vindictive note were set out for the children, luckily discovered by police before they arrived home.
Early 19th century woman, part of the Nazi Party, Ilse Koch came to be known as the Witch of Buchenwald. She was married to a man named Karl Otto Koch and was one of the first Nazis tried by the U.S. military. Her husband became powerful during the Nazi regime, and the power went straight to her head, making her perhaps a much more evil person than she might have been otherwise. She oversaw a prison in the 1940s and would take tattoos from murdered prisoners and use them as book covers and lampshades. On June 30th, 1945, she was arrested by American authorities and put on trial for a violation of the laws and customs of war. She received a life sentence at the age of 40, then spent 20 years in prison before taking her own life. Her husband was found guilty and was executed by a firing squad on April 5, 1945, in the very camp he once commanded. Yuki was a midwife from Japan by day and a serial killer, well, also by day. She and her husband killed, brace for it, babies. It wasn't just a couple of babies either. Her numbers have been cited anywhere between 85 and 169 babies. She didn't murder them violently, but rather neglected them, which is probably just as torturous. She'd later claim the parents had abandoned the infants, causing their deaths. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison, later appealed, and successfully got her sentence reduced to only 4 years. Rosemary began life as a victim herself. Her father was a paranoid schizophrenic that sexually abused her regularly. In her adult life, she became an abuser and took it even further. Rosemary and her husband, Fred West, tortured and killed young women and girls after kidnapping them together and holding them for days. Then they hid the bodies under the house. What's worse is that one of these young women was their own daughter they had together, and one of Fred's daughters from a previous marriage. In total, they murdered about 10 women, though it's possible there may be more we don't even know about. After being found and charged, Fred committed suicide awaiting trial, and Rosemary was sentenced to life in prison, the second British woman to receive this sentence in modern times.
Dennis is thought to have killed at least 25 people. but the real number might actually be closer to 40. She killed her own children, as well as a long string of gullible husbands and suitors. Called a female Bluebeard, Gunnis may have been done in by her partner in crime, but that's never actually been confirmed. After all, how do you explain the fact that the supposed corpse of the murderess was several inches shorter than the 6-foot-tall Gunnis? It's tough to choose between Ilse Koch, the bitch of Buchenwald, and Irma Grisi, the beast of Belsen. Both were vile Nazis, but we give the edge to Koch. The wife of the commander of 2 notorious concentration camps, Koch tortured and defiled prisoners and enjoyed selecting those destined for the gas chambers. Supposedly, she also cut tattoos from dead prisoners to keep as souvenirs. Convicted of crimes against humanity after World War II, she later hung herself in prison. No tears were shed.
Ilse was charged with personally selecting prisoners for murder. A gruesome selection of skins and shrunken heads was shown to the court.
Elizabeth Bathory is considered the most infamous serial killer in Hungarian/Slovak history. Rumors had circulated for years about missing peasant girls, offered well-paid work at the castle. They were never seen again. One of these rumors reached the ears of King Matthias II, who sent a party of men to the massive castle Sechti. The men found one girl dead and one dying. Another was found wounded and others locked up. Testimony of witnesses include severe beatings over extended periods of time, the use of needles, burning or mutilation of hands, biting the flesh off the faces, arms and other bodily parts, and the starving of victims. Due to her social status, she was never brought to trial but remained under house arrest in a single room until her death. Evil comes in a variety of shapes and sizes. Men, women, and children have all been known to be extremely evil. I sincerely hope you find this video entertaining. If you have any requests or suggestions, please leave them in the comments section below.
Going it way back to the late 1500s, this countess was from a noble Hungarian family. That alone wasn't going to get her fame, though, was it? She is also the most prolific female serial killer in history. She became well known as the Blood Countess by killing up to 650 peasant girls by beating, burning, mutilating, and even biting their faces off. As corruption goes, with her status, she couldn't be tried for her murders, so she was ordered to remain on house arrest, not only because of her cold-blooded murders, but because she allegedly bathed in the blood of her victims to stay young. If you ever took a history class, you might have heard of the Medicis, an Italian noble family known to commission art from some of the greatest artists of all time. Catherine, Queen of France, for about 20 years, was one of the most powerful and violent female rulers of medieval Europe, and that's quite the accomplishment. She was also known as the Black Widow and is credited for the Bartholomew's Day Massacre, a mob against the Huguenots Protestants in 1572. Up to 30,000 Huguenots died in the organized massacre led by Catholics.
Kings and queens have been known to kill at the drop of a hat. Mary I of England, also known as Bloody Mary, was more systematic. Wanting to restore Catholicism to England, she simply burned a bunch of Protestants, 283 to be exact. Her most heartless murder may have been that of the Archbishop of Canterbury. He renounced Protestantism and rejoined the Catholic faith, but she went ahead and burned him anyways. Not bloody
I want
sport.
to come clean and tell the world I killed those men first degree. Robbed and killed them to keep from any witnesses.
The abattoir worker who turned her skills on her husband and served him up for the kids.
She wasn't mad, she was just evil.
Tinning was convicted back in 1987 of killing her 4-month-old daughter, Tammy Lynn, smothering her with a pillow. Tinning had 9 children. All of them died in infancy or just beyond.
His wife, Rose, was convicted of 10 counts of murder, including that of her own child, Heather.
And the most evil woman in all of history? Elizabeth Bathory. A Hungarian countess of the 16th and 17th centuries, she enjoyed luring young women to her castle to torture, mutilate, and kill them, just for kicks. The estimated number of her victims goes as high as 650. Legend has it that Bathory bathed in the blood of her victims. It's probably not true, but we wouldn't put anything past the Blood Countess. Do you agree with our list? Who Who do you think are the most evil women in history? For more diabolical top 10s published every day.
Aileen Wuornos. Aileen Wuornos was a highway escort who was considered to be America's very first female serial executioner. She had brutally shot and robbed almost 7 men in Florida during the late 80s and the relatively early 90s. She claimed that the offenses were committed in self-defense. However, Wuornos was soon found guilty of taking the lives of all 6 men and placed on judicial execution. In 2002 she had been executed via lethal injection, and almost a year later, her story had been depicted in the Academy Award-winning movie, Monster. Myra Hindley. Myra Hindley was considered to be the most evil woman in British history. Along with her partner Ian Brady, she somehow carried out the Moors assassinations in the 1960s. Together, they kidnapped, violated and took the lives of 5 children and teenagers. When they were caught, Hindley showed absolutely no remorse for her offenses and pleaded not guilty. For almost 20 years, she maintained her innocence. However, back in 1987, she finally admitted that she had been involved in all the offenses. In 2002 she passed away in prison.
The scope of her offenses, for instance. What is known is that Gunnis was a serial killer who frequently preyed on affluent men who were courting women. These men would be drawn to her farm in Indiana, where she would kill them and steal their money. Additionally, many young children died while in Gunnis's care, some of whom had significant insurance benefits that Gunnis collected. There were numerous graves with human bones discovered on her property, and it's thought that Gunnis may have murdered up to 40 individuals. The fate of Gunnis is also unknown. It's widely accepted that she faked her death and left town with her money, despite the fact that she is purported to have died in a fire. In human history, proving to be one of the most notorious criminals of the Victorian era. In Victorian England, a practice known as baby farming paid adults to adopt infants. Amelia Dyer made this her line of work and adopted countless kids. She first decided to keep them until they died of natural causes, but she eventually changed her mind and decided to dispose of them soon after adopting them in order to keep the money without having to raise them. On March 30, 1896, one of Dyer's victims was discovered floating in the River Thames, which resulted in her capture and ultimate execution. Although only 6 deaths have been documented, it's thought that Dyer may have killed up to 400 people over the course of her life.
However, back in 1987, she finally admitted that she had been involved in all the offenses. In 2002 she passed away in prison. Karla Homolka. Karla Homolka is Canada's most notoriously female serial executioner. She had helped her husband Paul Bernardo violate at least 3 women, one of them being her own younger sister. She received a surprisingly light sentence for her offenses thanks to the plea deal that she managed to strike with the prosecution. For her testimony against her husband, Homolka received a reduced prison sentences only 12 years. The prosecution didn't feel badly about this deal at first. Homolka claimed that Bernardo had been harming her and that she was forced to participate in the offenses. However, video evidence later surfaced proving that Homolka wasn't a victim but an active participant in all of it. Rosemary West. Rosemary West was extremely notorious in Britain for her offences. She, along with her husband Fred, violated and dismembered a number of young women and even buried them in their cellar. One of these women was their own daughter, Heather. Since being charged, West has maintained her innocence. However, the jury saw everything differently. In 1995 she had been convicted of harming almost 10 women and was sentenced to life imprisonment without any parole.
And sons between 665 and 690. She did, however, go on to change the course of history by ascending to the position of Empress Regnant in 690, becoming the nation's first and only recognized female monarch. From 690 until her passing in 705, she remained in power. She ruled with bloodshed and cruelty, nevertheless. Wu Zetian waged numerous wars to expand her realm while also assassinating political rivals and silencing critics and dissidents. She established an empire and made China one of the most dominant nations in the world. Wu Zetian has long faced criticism for her ruthless schemes, despite the fact that this facet of her rule is usually praised. A woman from Hungary. Some of the young ladies who were sent to Bathory to learn proper etiquette perished while in her care. Bathory and 4 companions were detained on December 30, 1610, following an investigation. Numerous witnesses testified against Bathory, although the majority of the claims were rumor-based rather than fact-based. More than 600 girls were allegedly tortured and killed by Bathory, but these claims were never proven to be true. She was eventually imprisoned in her castle until her death. It's essential to keep in mind, though, that Bathory might have been the victim of political scheming and hence not guilty of the crimes asserted against her. The issue is still disputed and unclear. Now, before we reveal who is the cruelest woman in history, make sure to turn that black thumb blue and share the video with your friends. Orleans, who adopted her now famous name after marrying physician Louis Lalaurie in 1825. She listed 1140 Royal Street as her address and occupied a home there with her family and slaves. Lalaurie's slaves allegedly received horrific treatment, which was demonstrated in 1834 when their home was set on fire. Emergency personnel discovered 7 more chained up in the attic along with the one chained up in the kitchen, and they were all clearly marked with severe bodily injuries. The fact that they were being tortured was instantly evident. After a violent attack on the Lalaurie mansion, Lalaurie departed the city in haste, and a number of dead bodies were later discovered on her property. Although these women have been remembered for their wickedness and brutality, we are left with a chilling reminder. These women show us that even the most powerful of individuals can be capable of great evil. It serves as a reminder that we must all stay vigilant and not allow such atrocities to happen again.
Karla Homolka, already in prison for her part in those crimes and in the death of her sister.
It's all part of a deal she struck with the Crown in exchange for one thing, her testimony against Paul Bernardo.
And no one in her life was safe. Not her husband, not her stepkids, not her mother, and certainly not her own children.
For this list, we're discussing the most violent and infamous women to have ever lived. Which of these stories do you find the most outrageous? Let us know in the comments below. Catherine de' Medici.
Oh my God, Catherine!
Serving as the Queen of France from 1547 to 1559, Catherine de' Medici had enormous political sway over her sons, the French kings Francis II, Charles IX, and Henry III. They reigned through the French Wars of Religion and faced problems with a group of Calvinist Protestants called the Huguenots. It is widely believed by historians that de' Medici attempted to have their leader, Gaspard II de Coligny, assassinated. The attempt failed, and fearing retaliation from the most powerful Huguenots, de' Medici planned to kill them all before they could take action. The result was the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, which resulted in the deaths of between 5,000 and 30,000 Huguenots. Gertrude Banishevsky. A teenager named Sylvia Likens and her sister Jenny made friends with sisters Paula and Stephanie Banishevsky. When the Likens' mother was imprisoned for shoplifting, the sisters were sent to live with the Banishevskys. Their mother, Gertrude Banishevsky, soon began a system of abuse against Sylvia Likens and forced Sylvia's sister Jenny to participate in response to the Likens' late payments for the kids' boarding and care.
Yeah, Brooke, at the trial, they called this case the single worst crime perpetuated against an individual in Indiana's history.
With the help of her children and some neighbors, Banishevsky tortured Likens for 3 months. On October 26, 1965, Likens' body effectively shut down from the severe mistreatment, and she died from a combination of injuries, shock, and malnourishment. Gertrude Banishevsky was given life in prison, but was paroled on December 4, 1985. She remained free until her death in 1990.
And to know that you're responsible for taking someone's life is real hard to live with.
Oh, please, please. Oh, please. Get out of my face. It's okay. He's calling right now. I'm trying to. Can you please leave? Yes. Please.
Come on, 271.
Oh, Christ.
Wow. Hey, stop it! Oh my God! Call 911! Please help! Everybody help me! Please! Please help! Do I need to leave?
Did you guys call 911 already?
Please help!
Call 911.
Please help!
Call 911.
videotaping so they can see what she's doing. But call 911.
Please help.
Just stop. No. Hey, sweetie.
Say it.
It's all right.
Say it. Say it.
You don't want to do that.
Okay, say it now. What do you want it?
It's all right.
Say it. Say